All right, so welcome to the next video. In this one, we're going to talk about creating the bundles for your dye baths. So we've pre-cut some of the materials that we showed you in the last video. And we'll show you how to construct the bundles, give you a few tips and tricks to get the best bundles made for your dye baths. And then we're going to talk about the soaking process and mordants. Which we'll talk a little bit more in a minute about mordants. So
bundles are, at their most layman term, it's like a collection of goodies that we are going to submerge later in our dye pots. So we have gathered little bits and pieces of all of the stuff, like Tina said from the last video we showed you. We have found, because we've been doing this for over a year now, this is our second year doing dye pot workshops together, and we have found a size that works for us. It still provides us with a good selection of usable materials, and it doesn't get crazy. We made some crazy bundles a couple times, and truly the bigger your bundle, the less specific your results are.
Right.
So we like to say 3 inches by 2 inches. So 3 by 2, and then, an inch thick or under,
right,
as far as our bundles go.
Yeah, that's a good way to start this, and I would say as you get going into this, you're going to get obsessed, because as we get into further videos, when you get the reveal, you're going to want to do a new bundle. So to keep that manageable, these bundle sizes work great. But that doesn't mean as you go and you find a certain dye source that you really like and enjoy, you can make larger bundles. But for the purposes of the initial stages and to really get comfortable with the process, these dye bundles of a 3 by 2 size work really great.
And you can see we've pre-cut most of our stuff, but even some of the purchasable items, like the little bags are 3 by 2s, our feathers, tags, even our watercolor paper, and our rag paper, our cotton rag. It's all small. It's all in that sort of 3 by 2 size.
Right. So as you're preparing for this, just get out the different material you have. Like DeeDee said, we have different sizes. Don't cut them all in the same size. Vary the sizes that you have, because it's fun to have the variety in sizes. So you can see these are a little bit smaller. Throw in those other odd materials. So if you have the silk cocoons and things like that, throw them in here. Get your string or yarn that you're going to tie your bundles available. So
yes, I'm not 100% sure we mentioned that in the last video, but you have to have a tie that sort of ties your whole bundle together and keeps it secure, which is really important, because when you're dyeing, you don't want things floating around in your dye bath. It's just messy, and it's too much work to fish it out and have to rinse it. So to kind of keep a little bit of control in such a very mad type of workshop, the bundles are great. So you want something to tie them with.
So this is great. It's just a cotton string or twine. This works really great. And the other great thing about this is it dyes as well. So it's a functional and usable product.
Dual purpose.
You can also tie your bundles with sari, which is great too. So you can use sari to tie your bundles. You can use yarn to tie your bundles. Anything that is dyeable, so you might as well make it dyeable at the same time to tie the bundles up.
Agreed.
So we're just going to show you how to put some of these bundles together. So we've pre-cut, like we said, we pre-cut some of these products into the 3 by 2 approximate sizes.
Yes.
So you want to just start with, it's a layering process. So I tend to use, and DeeDee's probably similar, a muslin or a quilt
fabric
that has some stability to it for the outside of your bundle, because then it really contains everything on the inside. I wouldn't start with the gauze or the netting, because it's not really going to hold everything together. I would use something that is somewhat stable that can contain everything on the inside. So just, it's as simple as putting your first layer down and going through your product and putting the next layer down on top of it. And you can vary, so just because this layer has this little piece of lace on it, my next layer I'm going to take a piece of this raw wool, but I'm also going to add a tag. So my layer can be both of these pieces together. Then I'm going to add a piece of gauze. So I'm going to vary this up. This gauze is folded, so to keep the thickness down a little bit, I'm just going to cut it in half and place it down on my next layer. And you keep going till you're kind of happy with what your layer is. So DeeDee's got some of the more dimensional pieces in her bundle.
And I'm really just concentrating on keeping these smaller dimensional pieces on the inside. So they're in the middle. They're just like Tina said, I have fabric and a tag on the bottom. That's my sort of outside layer. This is what my middle looks like. And now I have a couple pieces. I have like a piece of lace. Here's the sheet that Tina cut up for us. I have some of the duck cloth. And then the paper, the watercolor paper is also good to have on the outside because it's so stable. It has so much stability to it. And we all know watercolor paper is meant to get wet. So it's thick and it will soak up all the water without tearing, as long, you know, I mean, if you're really hard on it, it could tear, but just be a little more gentle with that. So just like Tina said, I have all these layers. I have a very nice flat, thick layer on the bottom, all my sort of scrunchy little pieces in the middle, and then another couple layers of thickness on top.
So just for a gauge here, and I'm just gonna, this was hanging, it was just something that I have in my stash. I'm just going to fold it up. My thickness of my layer is maybe a ½ inch thick.
Yeah, I would say so.
DeeDee's might be a little thicker because she does have some of those wooden buttons in there and some of the feathers in there. So all you want to do is just take your bundle and tie it up. I would tie from both directions. Yep. Now the important thing to note is when you're tying these bundles, you want them to be tight enough, obviously, to contain the material, but you don't want it so tight that you're really crunching everything together, because you do want the dye to be able to get in between the different layers.
To permeate each item that's in your bundle.
Right. But you also don't want it so loose that you're not containing everything together in your bundle.
Because again, and with all the things that we love and all this different stuff that we add in these bundles, truly, if it was loose inside your dye pot, it would be such a mess to clean up later, having to fish all those pieces out. So this just helps kind of contain, again, that word madness is just, it's so spot on. And then we talked about too tight will create sort of a resist effect. If you think back like to 8th grade tie-dyeing, you know, as you use those rubber bands and tie up a tie, like a shirt or socks or whatever you might have been doing, it creates a resist effect where the dye can't get in because the fabric is too tight together. And that can happen here as well. And that may create, if you want to experiment, some really fun, interesting dye patterns later. But just be aware that that can happen if you tie too tight as well. So not too tight, not too loose.
And just play with it, experiment. Make a couple bundles that you feel maybe on the tighter side, and a couple on the looser side, and then you'll see which one you like best.
And so when we're done, here's a good, like, we can toss these and nothing falls out. So we know that that's a pretty good, I think that's a good term of measurement, right?
Yeah.
If you can kind of toss it around on your table and nothing falls out, you're probably good.
Yep. So that's it. Real quick bundle. We'll do another quick one here for the sake of this demo, and then we'll talk about the mordant process.
And one thing we can talk about too, like, you don't have to include everything in each bundle. So if you experiment and sort of separate your bundles out and, you know, pick and choose different things, the more you experiment, the more you're going to learn. I'll say that. That's true with everything. And if you have different layers and different dye pots, then you're going to get different results. And you'll have a wider variety of really fun hand-dyed stuff to work with in your mixed media. Whatever you might be doing, you know, if you're weaving or making books or altered art, assemblage art, collage, whatever that might be. So not each bundle needs to be identical.
So also with these bundles, we didn't talk about it in the last video, but it's an important point of reference. When you're choosing your material for your bundle, different materials will respond differently to the dye bath. So cottons will act differently than silks, which will act differently than wools, which will act differently than feathers. So when you're doing your bundles, try to have a variety of those different items in your bundle, because then you'll be surprised at the variety in color. You can be in the same dye bath, but you could get various shades of purple or various shades of blue or whatever the color of that dye bath is in one bundle, just because the fibers of the material you're using take the dye differently.
Absolutely. We have had some where, and we'll get way more into this later for sure, but one of our favorites was a very purpley dye, and depending on which part of the paper had soaked up the dye, it variegated from purple to brown on even the same piece of paper. Yep. So it's so cool, and there's just so much happening that you get to experiment with and have fun with, and you know, just branching out is really key when it comes to this process, I think.
Yep. All right, so we have a couple of bundles made here. I'm just going to stick a tag in here last minute because I think it would be kind of cool. So you have your bundles. This one's a little bit broader, but I had a piece of watercolor paper there, so I went over the edge. I'm not paying attention. So you have your bundles. So the next thing that is very important in the dyeing process is you've got fiber. Fiber by nature does not absorb dye easily. So there is products called mordants, which allow the fibers to open up and accept the dye pigments easier, and it also lets the fabrics or the material retain the dye in the material. Yes. So there are various mordants you can use, but the mordant that's the most commonly used for dyeing material is alum, and there's different types of alum. There's alum sulfate, there's potassium alum sulfate, both generally used in dye pot dyeing. If you have cream of tartar in your kitchen cabinet, which would look in like a container like this, that is alum sulfate, so potassium alum sulfate. You can use this as a mordant. Yep. If you really get involved with this and you want to do it in mass, this can get a little expensive buying these little tiny containers.
One at a time.
So you can go to, there's multiple dye sources online, and
we'll list a couple for you also.
Right, we can share those, but you can buy alum in larger containers like this. So obviously I buy it in larger containers when I'm dyeing it. And this is potassium alum sulfate as well. So these are non-toxic, but
yes, we want to touch base about that, because the key to our workshop is that everything we're doing is non-toxic. So it's all stuff you can get a hold of easily. You know, you can have it in your house. You probably have the majority of it in your house, truly, and it's not going to make you sick. Right. So it's all stuff you can do on any day. You don't have to have a special setup or, you know, special ventilation, although extra ventilation is always good.
Yes.
But just, it's non-toxic. So this is our suggestion. If we're going to tell you one mordant to use, because there are all kinds, this is our favorite. Non-toxic, it works well, it's affordable, gets the job done.
Right, but I would also say it can be toxic in very large quantities. So when you're using any mordants, and then in the next video when we actually talk about the dye sources, if it's in powder form, we would recommend putting mask on, because you don't want to be breathing in those particles, especially when you're putting them in water and they tend to puff up out of the water. Just put a mask on for your safety.
And even though it's non-toxic, that's not to say, you know, like something you're not going to be allergic to something. Some people are allergic to strawberries. Some people, you know, so just keep that in mind too. Like, yes, it's non-toxic, but we want you to be safe. And we'll probably say that 100 times during this workshop, because it is really important. Wear your mask if you're working with any of the powdery type stuff, and be aware of your own allergies for sure.
Right. So you want it to prepare your soaking bath. Just go ahead and you can fill a bowl that you have. The other point of reference too, just make sure in all the bowls, dye pot baths, any utensils, wooden spoons, or anything you're using to move the material around in the dye bath, or any type of tongs, it's only for your dyeing purposes. Don't intermingle your
everyday
tools
cooking
with your everyday cooking. You want to
Yeah.
keep those separate. Again, it's non-toxic, but you just don't want to mix things up like that.
It's just safety at its like basic level. Just keep, you know, your art supplies should be one thing, your cooking for your family and yourself should be another.
Right. So what I like to do to soak all of them, because I'll make all my bundles in advance, so I kind of have an idea of how many dye pots I'm going to have. So I pre-make all my bundles. Then I just fill my utility sink with warm water, and I add my alum to the water. So I would use per gallon of water about 2 tablespoons of alum. So you want to put your alum in the warm water, stir it around, make sure it's completely dissolved, and then submerge your bundles into the water, and you want to let them sit there for at least an hour to
Yeah.
make sure that those fibers have opened up.
I was gonna say, and that's what we're doing. So we're creating a soaking bath. So I'm not sure if we mentioned that specifically, but it's a bath. It's just clear water, clean water with our mordant in it, and we're gonna soak our bundles, however many you've made, for at least an hour with our mordant. And so the mordant again is gonna help open up the fibers of all of our bundles, paper, wood, and fabric, whatever we might have in there, and the warm water. So they act together and they help open up the fibers so that our bundles will accept the dye easier, and it's not such a tough dyeing process. And then the mordant also helps by acting as a little bit of a permanence.
Yep,
it helps it keep
the color fastness of the dye. So I'm sure you may be asking, you know, this is a very long process, and
Yes.
you have to be patient. But
And we are not patient people. We have the last year and a half now, like we have had to learn very hard to be patient, because trust us, as instant gratification mixed media artists with heat guns and everything at our disposal to speed along the process, this is not a process you can speed along.
Right, to get the best results, you do have to be patient. So even though these are soaking, in the meantime, and this will be the next video, we'll talk to you on how you prepare your dye baths, which takes a little bit of time too. So
yes, we found some ways to work around the length of waiting, but
right.
So we're gonna soak these for an hour.
Yep.
And an hour is enough as long as your water is warm to start with. Just that's one way to kind of speed up the process a little bit. Just like when you're cleaning, right? Warm water helps the process. It has our alum in it. We're gonna soak for an hour.
And again, 2 tablespoons of alum per gallon of water.
Right. And just keep that ratio in mind. If you're using a little less, you know, go less. If you're using more, just, you know, keep your ratio the same. And we're gonna move on to the next video. While this is happening, you can be starting your dye pots. It's so exciting.
Yeah.
That's the best part.
Yeah.
No, it's not. It's all the best.
The reveal is the best part.
It's all the best. I sometimes I feel weird in videos because I get so excited.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right, so we'll see you in the next video.
Yeah. See you there.